This meeting is being recorded.
Understood. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Mothers in Business webinar today. If for the presentation you could mute yourself, you can keep the video on if you like. It records only the speaker and the presentation, but you can also turn it off if you feel more comfortable. And Laura will say more about it soon, but she is also fine with you interrupting her. So whenever you want to say something during the presentation, then of course unmute yourself and say something. You can here find our contacts on Facebook, our website, Instagram, where you can follow us, and also email where you can contact us. So if you need, you can get back here to the recording and look at those. Just quickly about what Mothers in Business and Mothers in Business International in particular is and what you're looking at here today. Mothers in Business is a Finnish nationwide volunteer organization, and as it has been only in Finnish until 2020, MiB International has been formed at the beginning of 2020 and then was a bit delayed due to Corona. And in August 2020, we then picked up, found volunteers and started organizing Mothers in Business international events in English. And the goal of the project is to develop more content in English, because there's so much great content in Mothers in Business, so much expertise and so many interesting topics. And we want to make those available for non-Finnish speakers. We want to enhance networking and offer low threshold peer support and meetings where you can meet inspiring people. We want to influence also, especially towards a more inclusive and family-friendly and international Finland. And we also focus on personal development, on supporting mothers in developing their skills, their career path, and help them in combining working life with family life. Yeah, and in order to do so, we have several things that we offer. We have more or less monthly mingles, some casual networking events where you can get together with other mothers in business, where other mothers, working mothers, to talk about different topics, something just like coffee and having a talk. We will have in the future, hopefully, again, the language cafes, which is also 1 hour monthly, where you can practice languages, not just one, but have like a little bit like language tables where you can jump from one to one. We have been organizing this online during the past year and a half, but it's been a little bit on hold for now. We used to also have stroller walks in Helsinki, Tampere, and Oulu, but due to Corona, they are also on hold at the moment. But we are organizing webinars every month. The next one is already this Friday about motherhood and entrepreneurship. And then we have another, the last one out of this series, together with Familia and International Working Women of Finland, which is on the 9th of February, on divorce and intercultural marriages. And then once the pandemic situation allows, we will hopefully have company visits where we can visit companies that that hire internationals. And our events are open for all and free of charge, and you're always welcome to participate along with your kids. And now I'm super happy to introduce Laura Hytti, who is speaking to us today about multilingual education in intercultural families, and will introduce herself and Familia that she is working for. And I will stop sharing my screen so that Laura can go ahead and share hers. Welcome. You are muted.
There we go. Thank you. I am working with 2 screens at the moment, so I got a little bit lost there. Thank you, everybody, very much for the introduction. And yeah, before I kind of switch my screen on and go into the presentation, I just wanted to say what an absolute pleasure it is here to be here to talk to all of you. I am first and foremost a mother. I have a wonderful little 2-year-old toddler who keeps me on my toes, and I think motherhood has, is everything. It has taught me so much. It has brought so much to my life, including numerous gray hairs. My little toddler who currently wants everything and nothing simultaneously has definitely taught me that I am very patient. I'm also quite funny to a 2-year-old, but also that I'm also kind of capable of doing a lot more than I give myself credit for on very, very, very little sleep. And so being here in this forum, I think with Mothers of Business, I think that perhaps in the audience there are other mothers there with us who can share that experience. And and for that reason, it's really lovely to be here to talk to you. So I'm gonna share my screen. Bear with me.
We see the whole thing again.
Can you see the whole screen, or you can see my notes as well?
With the notes.
Damn. Sorry, just tested it.
Yeah, no worries. I will answer a question from the chat in the meanwhile.
Yeah,
yes, we will upload the recording to YouTube. So it will also be sent around to everyone who has signed up in an email, and also be posted in the Mothers in Business channels on Facebook. So if you're not yet, there's also a Facebook group for Mothers in Business International if you're interested to join. And it will be available on YouTube also on the Mothers in Business channel. But we still see your notes.
Oh, okay, sorry. It did exactly the same thing. My very messy notes. Don't read them. Hold on.
Maybe I can help with that. Hi, I'm Kinga.
Hi, Kinga.
It's about your displays. You have 2 displays.
Yeah.
But your sharing settings in the PowerPoint, you can. There's an option to like switch up the displays.
Yes, now it works.
Now
perfect.
It works.
I have tested it before and it worked. But
yeah, I wonder why.
Yes, now it works.
Okay, and also you can see it changing as well, right? Fantastic. Yes. Okay, there we go. Off to a wonderful start. Yes, so my name is Laura, mother above everything. I am also the coordinator for a project called BElingual here at Familia. For those of you who are not familiar with Familia, we are an organization that supports intercultural families in Finland. We've been working since 1988, advocating for, supporting, providing services to enhance the well-being of intercultural families in Finland. So with intercultural families, we mean families where the couple or the members of the family come from 2 or more different cultures. And I've actually been with Familia for 6 months on the BElingual project. And the BElingual project is a fairly new project, though one that has been in the making with Familia for very many years. And the aim of the project is to support families with intercultural, multilingual families with under-school-age children in supporting their children's language development and, very importantly, also their identity development. And I'll tell you a little bit more about BElingual at the end of my presentation for those of you who are interested in what we do. I'm also a Peach ambassador. So Peach is an EU initiative that also kind of works to support and promote bilingualism and cultural heritage in the EU. And they've developed a couple of really great resources that I'll also share with you a bit later on. Some of this presentation is taken from their resources, and in my role as a Peach ambassador, I'm also kind of here to spread the positive message about the kind of benefits that supporting children with their kind of multilingualism can bring to families. I thought I'd start kind of before we go into the presentation to talk to you a little bit about my own relationship with language. So I myself am bilingual. I grew up kind of outside Finland. So I moved back to Finland shortly, a couple of years ago. And before that, I lived abroad. And so I kind of was what you would call a simultaneous bilingual. So I learned my Finnish and English simultaneously. I had a very Finnish speaking home with an English speaking international environment. And moved back to Finland when I was about 9 years old. I'm also dyslexic. And at that point, English was definitely my so-called dominant language, and I really struggled with my Finnish, and I struggled with my kind of reintegration process, very kind of mainly because of language, and I was actually held back a year. So I have very strong memories of kind of like the language issues that I guess I experienced as a child at that point, and kind of my dyslexia kind of really kind of came to play in that kind of transition in my life as well. After that, I've kind of after Finland, lived in Spain for a while, and then moved to the UK, and then to kind of Sweden, and I was in Uganda for a while. So kind of my use of language has changed a lot throughout my life. My relationship with the different languages that I speak has changed. So I speak Finnish and English. I, at one point, was speaking Spanish quite fluently, and have kind of dabbled in different languages. But I identify almost as a different person dependent on what language I'm using. So I feel that I'm different people in different languages. I am different people in different contexts, and I feel more confident in the languages that I speak in different contexts, and have felt that very differently throughout my life. And kind of the reason that I say this is because I think that as parents, as we kind of think about the choices that we are making for our children, and hopefully with our children, our own relationship with language can play quite a prominent part on how we think about things and how we make those decisions. So I'm actually going to invite all of us now. We're going to do a couple of polls to see kind of what kind of people and families we have here with us, but I'm going to invite you all to take a minute just to think about your own relationship to language. Maybe think a little bit about kind of, what are the roots of the languages that you use? How has your relationship with those languages changed throughout your life, and kind of what kind of feelings does it bring up? So I'm actually just going to be quiet for about a minute or so, and I'm going to let you have a think about that. Don't answer the poll just yet. just a moment to all of ourselves. That's okay. Or you can also use this opportunity to answer the poll that has just gone up, which is also in relation to your family. So how you would kind of describe your family at this point in time. Okay. I think we have answers from everyone. Great. Okay, so we have some bilingual families, we have some trilingual families, and multilingual families, and a plurilingual family as well. Obviously, there are various different ways to describe the ways in which we use language, and we'll go into that in a little bit. Oh. Okay, there we go. Now you can see the results, right?
Yes.
Okay.
16 out of 21 have been taking part.
So we have a mono, bi, tri, multi, and plurilingual group of people here with us. So hopefully lots of experiences to share as we go along. Let's see. There we go. Okay, so just in terms of what I promised to talk about over the next kind of 45 minutes or so, the aim is to kind of talk a little bit about some myths and misperceptions related to learning in multilingual homes, and talk about some of the challenges and opportunities related to raising multilingual children. And this very much with the kind of the background as I've written kind of in the introduction, that a lot of the advice that we receive and a lot of the educational approaches that we and our children are kind of immersed in are often based on monolingual and kind of nuclear family models. That is changing. And there is kind of attention being paid to different ways of approaching family situations and kind of languages that children speak, but it is still kind of fairly monolingual. But families are not kind of monolingual anything. We come in various different shapes and sizes and in different situations, and families speak different languages in and outside the home. And parents are faced with kind of a lot of decisions and a balancing act of kind of the benefits that they can get from supporting their children's multilingualism, but also a kind of the acknowledgement that it is challenging and it is a lot of work to nurture various different languages within a home. So we'll talk about myths and misconceptions, some challenges and opportunities, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of language environment from a socio-ecological perspective, so kind of placing the child and family within our community, and we'll kind of use that as a way to think about the different levels of influence that we need to take into consideration when we're kind of making decisions for how we're going to educate our children in our home. And then we have some time for discussion at the end, but like Avia said, I really welcome you to kind of put your hand up, interrupt me if anything that I say makes you think of a moment that kind of fits into that and you'd want to share it, or a question or a thought or a suggestion. This will be much more interesting for all of us if you do. So please feel free to kind of interact and join in as I'm going along. Start us off with a couple of kind of basic definitions. So we are talking about multilingual education in intercultural families. So when we talk about bilingualism or multilingualism or plurilingualism, we tend to use those terms fairly interchangeably. Bilingualism, of course, indicates 2 languages, where multilingualism indicates more than 2. But bilingualism is also often used as a kind of an umbrella term to cover 2 or more languages being spoken. And I use this definition here from Francois Grosjean, whose name I'm sure that I can't pronounce. But he has defined a bilingual as a person who regularly uses 2 or more languages in their everyday life. So, and I use this because this does not talk about frequency of use. It does not talk about proficiency. So it kind of strips away the need for perfection, or takes us away from that concept that to be a bilingual or a multilingual, you have to have some kind of similar proficiency in the languages that you speak. But rather just that we, well, 70% of the world who are kind of multilingual ish, we use languages in different ways in our everyday life. And what is important is what those languages mean to us and how they facilitate us in kind of living our lives and expressing ourselves and expressing the world around us, particularly for children as they grow, how they see themselves and how they're able to express themselves. As I mentioned before, an intercultural family is a family where the members of the family come, sorry, typo there, from different cultures. And I think that one of my colleagues, Hanna, has mentioned this many times. I'm not sure where exactly it comes from, but a quote from a child who said that, they're not just a sum of their parents, they are their own self. And so equally, I think when we're talking about families, families are not just a sum of the cultures that they have within the family. They're not just a sum of the mother's culture or father's culture, if you have a two-parent family, for example. But families create their own cultures. They create their own ways of using language, and they create their own internal family culture. And I think that's really important to note. Multilingual education generally just refers to the use of two or more languages as a medium of instruction. And today we're really going to be talking about kind of the kind of educational choices that we make within the home, and when kind of raising our children multilingually. Poll 1 we did already, but I'm going to take us to poll 2. And this really is to acknowledge the fact that, families are diverse and made up of various different components. So if you could select any of the options from here that you identify your family identifies with. You may be more than one of these things. We often are. And of course, this is not an exhaustive list. It's just a couple of examples of different types of families.
And if you have questions or not sure about the terms, of course, you can open your microphone and ask.
I can perhaps as we wait. So two-parent family is obviously kind of an expression of a nuclear family, I guess. Single parent family would be one like mine. I'm a single mom, where one parent runs the kind of daily activities of a family. Rainbow family, a LGBTQI plus family. Intercultural family, as we said, a family with more than one culture. An adoptive family would be a family with adopted children. And a blended family would be a åsioperhe, I guess in Finnish you call it, but a family where two families come together from kind of from previous marriages or post-divorce, etc. Okay, I think we can. Okay, so we have mainly two-parent families. We have intercultural families. We have an adoptive family with us and a blended family with us. Great, fantastic. Here we go. Awesome. I think also it's really important to note that when we're talking about the kind of language-related decisions that a family makes, the structure and the situation of the family can have a really big impact on that. Blended families, for example, intercultural blended families can have, lots of different languages coming together from different sides of the family, and maybe also to note here that there's also different perceptions of family. We a very kind of Eurocentric or maybe Nordic perception is a very kind of small nuclear family. Other people might perceive a family to extend to grandparents, broader family. There can be kind of cross-border families. It's really a question of how we define ourselves. Okay, and then last poll, and maybe just before you put this up, Maria, I also approached this presentation from a kind of a rights perspective. So from the perspective that all children have the right to their languages and cultures, and that it is kind of communities or societies and parents' responsibility to create an environment where children can have access to their different languages and cultures, to enable them to kind of develop a balanced personality, a balanced kind of identity. But parents have to make a lot of decisions to enable that, and they need a lot of support in doing that. They need resources, they need knowledge, skills, they need community. And a lot of these kind of myths and misperceptions that exist around multilingualism can often kind of be these kind of difficult decision points for parents when they consider what they want to do. So if we get the next poll up, I'm just going to ask you which of these statements you think are true. And you can choose any of the statements there that you think are true. So young multilingual children will have a delay in learning. Each parent should only speak one language to their child, or the child might get confused about the languages. Children pick up languages like sponges. Bilingualism is detrimental to school success. Bilingual children are good at learning new languages, and you can only become truly bilingual or multilingual if you learn the languages at a very young age. Okay, I think we have 16 out of 20, so let's end that. Okay, so no one thinks that young multilingual children will have a delay in learning. Some say that each parent should only speak one language to their child, or they'll get confused. Quite a few saying that children pick up languages like sponges. No one thinks that bilingualism will be detrimental to school success. And then that a lot of you think that multilingual children are good at learning new languages. And a few think that you can only become truly bilingual or multilingual if you learn those languages at a young age. Okay, well, let's see. So these are obviously just a few of the kind of myths and misperceptions that kind of continue to persist. And I've actually taken these from a Peach resource. They have some really nice kind of quick kind of 5-minute videos on their website. You got the link there. But these are kind of the 5 myths that they've raised as coming through with them quite frequently. So young multilingual children will have a delay in learning. So you guys were quite right. There's no evidence of a delay. Often what is perceived as a delay, so that kind of children don't know all the words at a certain point in age, is kind of counteracted by the fact that say you have a child who is multilingual in 3 languages, if they know the word for a cat, say in 3 different languages, each one of those words kind of counts as a language, as a word learned. So sometimes multilingual children can have a slightly higher kind of word count or word acquisition at a younger age than monolingual children. But if you look at count the words rather than the kind of like the objects or the things, then it's on kind of par. Children can get confused by hearing more than one language. So this is often something that people hear in schools, for example. Parents are often told that, you know, you need to be careful that your child doesn't get confused. But there's actually quite strong evidence to suggest that, you know, children at a very early age, possibly as early as in the womb, can tell the difference between different languages. So there's some really interesting research that was carried out where they looked at kind of very young babies' recognition of their kind of mother tongue, and they did it by playing kind of child's mother tongue in another language to the child, not spoken by their mother, but by someone else. And the children picked up the kind of differences in rhythm in their mother tongue versus the language that they weren't familiar with. So very early on, children kind of pick up the rhythms. And that's why, for example, playing music to children at a very early age is a really great learning tool, because they pick up that kind of rhythmic difference within languages. Children do often use words from different languages whilst they're speaking, but that can be seen more as kind of using your language efficiently than being confused. It's more that a child says kind of like, okay, I don't know what this word is in this language, so I'm just going to say it in this other language that I know it in. And then later on, that often develops into what is called code switching, which is more of a kind of elective conscious thing that people do when they speak more than one language. And that has a lot to do with kind of expressing kind of solidarity with other people who speak the same language as you and a similar understanding. So code switching is about using certain terminology that is specific to that language, that expresses an emotion or a feeling or a situation more efficiently in that language. And you use that when you know that other people will understand it. So people who speak the same language as you will understand that specific term. And then there's people like me who speak very, very proficient English on a regular basis. But much more so in a code switching kind of mode when I'm with people who I know will understand me when I say those things. Children are like sponges and will pick up any language spoken around them. Not quite. Yes, children do pick up language. Children do learn quickly, but you do need a certain amount of exposure and consistency for supporting children's language acquisition. There's different numbers, kind of 30% is what is often quoted, so that it's important that children get at least 30% of exposure in a certain language during a day, for example, for them to pick it up. But there's also a lot of value in talking about kind of the quality of the exposure that they get. And there's some, lovely quotes around kind of that people want to speak the language that they are loved in. So kind of, it's really important to not just think about like the quantity of access that children have to language, but also the kind of the emotional bond that they build with that language, and how they feel in that language and how valuable it becomes to them through that kind of quality of exposure rather than necessarily having lots and lots of the exposure. Bilingualism is detrimental to school success. So none of you thought this, and you're right, not really. However, sometimes school environments are not supportive of children's needs. And sometimes teachers, daycare teachers, for example, may have misperceptions about multilingualism, and that can impact school success if children are not supported in the way that they should be supported. It can also affect children's confidence. It can impact their identity development. So it's really important that parents work together with schools and the educational environments that children are in to make sure that we're kind of moving in the right direction with that. You can only become truly bilingual or multilingual if you learn languages at a very young age. So no, there's no age limit, but there are differences in approaches. So sometimes you hear we get kind of like concerns from parents saying like, oh, but like, have we passed that window where a child can pick up the languages? If the family has chosen to concentrate on a specific language and then say at 5 years old, introduce another home language. There's no time limit, the game is not lost, but it might just mean slightly different approaches that need to be taken, and different motivational kind of tactics, I guess, for children at different ages. So moving on to kind of some of the challenges related to raising multilingual children. I'm sure that any of us here who are raising multilingual children will kind of find some of these familiar. But the first thing that I put down here is keeping a parental motivation and deciding on a cohesive family strategy. And this really has to do with kind of parents' approach. It can be really difficult to keep up a consistent approach, especially if your children are kind of not warming to a language, or perhaps would prefer to speak another language, or are finding it really difficult to talk in one of your home languages, because you also want to be able to communicate with your child. As your child kind of develops an ability to express emotion in one of the languages, it might be really tempting to kind of cuddle up in that language, right? Rather than persist with your other home language that you might have chosen to kind of proceed in. One of the things that I hear quite a lot working with families is that parents have a slight kind of mismatch in terms of their perceptions of importance of promoting different home languages. So one parent might feel very strongly that it's really important to promote both home languages, for example, whereas another parent maybe doesn't feel that strongly about it. And that can kind of lead to slight mismatches in how families approach language learning. Generally, lack of resources at home if you're working with, or if one of your family languages or numerous of your family languages are languages where you don't have a lot of resources, it can be quite difficult to find things to do in that language. My son, for example, he's Finnish Kenyan, and we try to use Swahili at home, but his kind of family language is actually Luo. And there's very few resources in that. And as a single parent trying to promote that language, I find it nearly impossible to kind of introduce and engage our kind of daily lives in that language, because the resources just don't exist. There's also a lack of support of resources within early education and education systems. So as we mentioned before, sometimes the kind of professionals working within those institutional settings don't have the resources that they need to be able to kind of support your children in those environments. A lack of community is something that has come up over and over and over again in the work that I do. We are putting together kind of a family network, trying to build a platform where kind of families can find community. And in all my conversations with parents, one of the main things that they find lacking is an ability to connect with other families and be a part of a community, and to kind of immerse their children in that kind of in an environment where that language, their kind of home language, is a normal thing. Your child might resist speaking a language if they don't feel that it is useful for them, if they don't connect with it, and that can be really, really difficult. Life situations change. We, as parents, probably all know that when something changes, it always usually has an impact on your child in some way. It also can have an impact on language. So if the kind of family dynamics change, if there's separation, if a parent starts a new job and is at home less, so there's less exposure to that language, those can all impact how the child is able to get access to that language, but also their motivation. And then, of course, societal structures and power relations particularly in terms of how different languages are viewed, both within the home and also more broadly kind of within community. But there's, of course, a lot of opportunities to engage with language learning within homes. And the three kind of core components that I've picked out that are often represented in various different kinds of bits of research and literature are the need for a language, exposure to a language, and enthusiasm for a language. And those are kind of the three things that parents, I think, can work on, right? And can systematically kind of think about how they can do these things within their family. So benefit and need. if a child finds a language beneficial to them and they feel that they have a need for that language, they have something to motivate them in terms of utilizing that language. One of the most important things is access to experiencing that language in community. So whether it is with kind of friends who have children who use that same language at their home, whether it is joining some kind of like family language group or club, whether it's going to kind of cultural activities from your kind of other home culture, for one of your home cultures where your other home language might be spoken. It's really important for children not just to experience language within community, but also to hear their parents using that language with others. So that it isn't just something that is used only within the family, but they can see its kind of wider kind of value in terms of communicating with others and being part of that wider community. Positive peer pressure, having friends that you can speak that language with. Of course, in terms of just kind of being able to find that contact can be quite difficult. It's not available to everyone. If you live in a fairly small community, you might not be able to find people who speak, the kind of families that speak the same language as you do. So kind of using virtual forums can be a good thing, but kind of trying to find other children that your children can connect with to get that kind of positive peer pressure. And here, it's often said that trying to find children who are monolingual in that language, so that there's kind of like a need to speak that other language, can also be beneficial. Family, being able to connect with other family members that speak that language using video calls to family abroad and so forth. And having that be a kind of like a nurturing, loving relationship is the kind of relationship that children have with their grandparents. And that's a really kind of, can be a powerful kind of opportunity to exercise that language. And then also culture and pride in that culture. So language, is a bridge to identity and culture and vice versa. And being able to kind of cultivate an understanding of one's culture and kind of having special rituals and things that kind of are special to your family and to that culture, and kind of cultivating children's pride in that culture and in that difference that they have can be a really strong motivator. Engaging your children is also a really important part. So we talked about kind of exposure and that it doesn't necessarily need to be a certain amount, or you don't need to have a certain amount of proficiency in that language. You don't need to be grammatically correct in the way that you use that language, but the kind of quality and warmth of that engagement is what's really important. So things like reading together, using kind of music, art, movement, using language in activities, and also meeting your child where they are. What are they interested in? If your child is going through, if they're doing colors at school, you can kind of bring that activity into the home. So also, familiarizing yourself with what your child is doing in other contexts outside the home, and using those as a kind of medium to build your child's interest in a home, in your kind of other language is also a good way to kind of make it fun and interesting and build linkages. And then practical motivation, just fun things like utilizing mascots or things to kind of symbolize a switch. So if you have a language strategy where you use kind of language as a part of the time, you could use like a puppet, or maybe like you put on a certain hat or something like that to kind of symbolize that we're switching to another language now. Routines are really important, and they kind of consist throughout life. And then doing fun things like games in your kind of home language being secret games that can motivate kids a lot, and kids can get really excited about that. Having monolingual pets, for example, who only speak that specific language. But most importantly, that you do that all with enthusiasm. Children can sense everything. And so if a child senses that you are tired, or you're frustrated, or you're kind of frustrated that your child isn't utilizing that language or picking up those words or whatever it is, they can sense that. So and it's so easy to do, but being enthusiastic with your child, making it fun, having fun with them. These are all kind of opportunities for kind of instilling motivation and a want to utilize that language at home. Okay. And the kind of last part, I don't know, I can maybe pause for, I'm a little motor mouthing, pause for a little bit in case anyone has anything that they would want to ask at this point, or share or delve into. See a couple of chats.
Yeah, there was one question in the chat if it has any impact on the accent if a child learns the language at a younger age or older age.
Yeah, I think yes, it can do. Again, I think it has to do with exposure, maybe the number of languages, how similar the languages are to each other. Yeah, definitely. And I think that an important part of language is also the identity that we build with it, right? And it's not just about how we see ourselves, but how others see us. And if, you know, your accent in that language is perceived by others as not being kind of fluent, then that can, of course, also impact how confident children are in using that language. Same with adults, right? And that has a lot to do with how we're outwardly seen by others and kind of our feeling of belonging to that group of people who speak that language. But yeah, for sure, there can be impacts on accent. And when we go into the kind of the next section, when we talk about kind of language strategies, I think it's important to think about kind of what your goals are, what kind of level of proficiency, be accent-wise or vocabulary-wise or reading and writing-wise as well. You know, what kind of areas of language learning as a family you want to achieve, and what is realistic and what is needed, what your goals are. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. Before we go into that, I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about kind of placing language learning within the home in a kind of socio-ecological environment. So we all live within a community, within a society. And so there's kind of different factors that influence at all these different levels, and there's different things that need to be considered. So when you think about how you want to kind of shape the multilingual education within your home, or kind of the decisions that you make around which languages you use and how, you of course need to think about your child and their individual characteristics. You know, what kind of a learner are they? What kind of an expressor are they? Do they have any learning difficulties that might impact how they can uptake language? You know, are they shy? Are they outwardly expressive? And what do they want? What are they interested in? In terms of the family, of course, the family's resources, I think, are a really important thing to consider. There's a lot of things that can be done. There's a lot of, you know, advice on kind of having these very structured approaches, but is that realistic for your family? Do you have the resources and energy to do that? Are the external resources that you need something as simple as being able to get access to books, you know, to have at home can be a challenge if you have a language that is not kind of spoken very much in the community that you live in. You know, are both parents able to commit time? Who spends more time with the children? That's something that often has quite a significant impact on what languages end up being spoken at home. If the mother, for example, as often is the case, spends more time with the children at home, then the languages that the mother speaks with the children might end up being the more dominant languages. So kind of the family dynamic, structures, and situation, kind of you need to think about what's possible. Friends and social networks. Does your family have kind of other families that speak that language? Where can you find such families? Is part of your language strategy reaching out to the community, reaching out to other families to find that contact? Then in terms of like organizationals, we're talking about institutional, and that can be daycare, it can be school or other organizations. So what options are available? In Finland, for example, there are daycares where there are language baths, there are kind of bilingual daycares, there's private daycares that provide specific language education, if that's something that you can afford, for example. How is language considered within the daycare environment that your child is in? Are there steps you want to take to impact that? Are there conversations that you can have with the daycare that your child goes to make sure that they understand your child's language needs and kind of what you want to do as a family to support your child's language learning? Same goes for schools. You know, there are bilingual schools in Finland. Obviously, often, you know, there's not that many of them. There's mother tongue education. But again, you know, if you live in Helsinki area, there's fairly decent access to that, but it is quite challenging in terms of times. But if you live outside the greater Helsinki area, options kind of are reduced. And in addition to that, kind of, you know, is that going to be the environment that your child is in now for a longer period of time? Might that change? How do you need to prepare for that change? At a communal and a public policy level, there's of course issues related to legislation. For example, in Finland, you can only register one mother tongue. That has an impact on the access to services that your child will have. Familia, for example, is advocating to change that, to diversify and kind of have the ability to register more than one mother tongue. But those kind of public policy issues, you know, they may seem really big and difficult to consider and don't feel like things that you need to think about within your home, but they do impact, you know, the environment that your child is kind of growing up in and the environment they're using their different languages in. How friendly is the community that you are in towards multilingualism? What are the attitudes? You know, all those things are a part of the decisions that you are making, as large as it sounds. Okay, and then I am probably over time, but just kind of some concrete things in terms of kind of considering family language goals. So like I mentioned before, kind of when you're kind of thinking about what kind of choices you're going to make, and these are choices that I think language learning is a continued and changing process. It is never over. All the changes that happen within the family, within life, need to kind of lead to a reassessment of how you're approaching things with your kids. But so really good things to think about are kind of like, what is important right now? What are your resources right now? And what is really important right now? What do you want when your child is 3 years old, when they're 5 years old? What about when they're a teenager? You know, what do you want for them in terms of their kind of language, but also their identity and their connection to the culture that language represents for them? What about when your kid goes to school? What's it going to look like? What about after that? What about when they're a young adult? You know, what kind of connection do you want to make sure that your child has and access to those cultures that the languages represent as well? We also talked about kind of what are you aiming for? What is enough? We talk about passive, active, and absolute kind of language. So passive generally refers to understanding the two languages, but only speaking one. Active means that you understand both languages and you can speak kind of go through like simple conversations in your minority or kind of less dominant language. And then there's kind of absolute, which is being fluent in both or numerous of your languages. And you know, that is something that requires a lot of effort. So really, it's also worthwhile thinking that this is, I think there's, I just listened to something where they're saying that really by, you know, encouraging your children's language learning and allowing them access, you're sowing a seed. And just because they don't use all their family languages in an absolute way, for example, when they're younger, that doesn't mean that they're not going to pick those up when they're older. So ensuring that children have access at some level in a way that is suitable for your family can also mean that then later on in life, when they choose to or they're more interested in it, they have that kind of seed that they can pick up and then grow later on in life. In terms of language strategies, these are kind of fairly common, I guess, known concepts. So I'm happy to answer questions about these, but generally there's kind of 4 main strategies that families use. The one person, one language strategy. This works if you have a 2-parent family where both parents speak a kind of a different language as their mother tongue. And the one person, one language strategy basically means that they each speak only that language to their children. Often there is then a kind of a 3rd family language that might be English that the parents speak amongst themselves. But the aim is to fairly kind of strictly stick to one language per one parent. That, of course, can be quite difficult when you have one language which is a majority language and one which is a minority language. And there's kind of both kind of internal power differences between the languages within the home, but also within community. There's the minority home language at home strategy, which means that you only speak the minority language at home. That includes also the parent for whom that language is not necessarily their mother tongue. So that can be very challenging for the parent who doesn't speak that language kind of natively or as their mother tongue or fluently, and can require quite a lot of effort from them. But does kind of create this language environment within the home where only that language is spoken. There's also time and place, which is kind of a pretty flexible strategy where families choose to use languages in certain places at certain times. So it could be that we will speak our minority language whilst we have dinner, or, you know, in the car, or when we are with these people. Time and place can also refer to kind of family situations where you have a single language at home, but then you have a second kind of family language, which is the community language. So then the time and place for the kind of majority language is at school, for example, and then the time and place for minority languages at home. So this approach, I guess, is sometimes perceived to be less effective in terms of kind of solidifying the connection to language, but it is also quite flexible. And then there's the 2 parents, 2 languages approach, which is increasingly popular because families also, parents themselves are bilingual, so might both speak a language with like same proficiency. And that then just basically means that both parents use both languages at home. As a single parent, for example, I guess I kind of use this approach, except that I am just the parent who speaks both of the languages. Though we, for example, I try to make sure that we speak, I guess, in a way also time and place, because we try to only speak English at home, with Swahili introduced at certain times. So it is also often that there is a combination of these, and that what strategy you use will change throughout the lifespan, for sure. I've also put a note here to kind of bridge daycare and school and home. So it is also kind of important to bring those two worlds together. So if you're kind of bringing your child's language learning at school, what they're studying, kind of what they're working on, I guess, or what they're learning in those environments, and bringing that into the home, and equally kind of working with the educational kind of institutions that your child accesses to try to ensure that they are aware of what your strategies are and how you would hope your child's kind of language approaches to be working in those educational environments as well, through conversation and kind of being involved in school activities and so forth. Okay, am I out of time yet?
No, it's all good.
That is actually it for my spiel for kind of content-wise. So I just have a couple of things. I guess the main thing I would just like to kind of, you know, is that each family is their own unit. They have their own culture. They have their own requirements. They have their own resources, and there is no wrong way to go about the multilingual education in your home. There are decisions that are made to meet your life circumstances at that point, to meet your goals that you set for yourself, and that will change throughout time. The most important thing is to ensure that, you know, your child has access to their languages and cultures, and that you do it with warmth and with love. And so, yeah, all the other things are kind of variables that can change. As I mentioned before, Peach is a great resource that is available online. They've had 2 kind of guides that have come out. So how to raise a bilingual child, that also goes through kind of age-specific examples and kind of practical activities, gives tips to parents, and they have some videos, and they also have like a multilingual resource bank as well on their website. So that's a great place to go and kind of check out practical ideas for how to support your children's language learning and education. And also there is a guide for kind of supporting multilingual children in educational environments. So a great resource. And then just to do a quick mention of BElingual, we have just opened our family network to kind of registrations members. So BElingual, the BElingual Family Network is a community. We hope that we will be able to kind of bring parents, multilingual parents across Finland together, so that they can find other families who speak the languages that they speak at home, and connect. We are also setting up and offering language clubs, or kind of language focused family clubs in different languages. What languages we will be having clubs in will depend on where we get volunteers. So all the activities are free, but they are also reliant on parents who want to organize activities. So if you are a parent and you would really like to find some kind of activities where your child can connect with other kids and other families, this is a really great opportunity to help make that happen with support. So we provide training and resources and location and cover costs. We're also going to be running a number of events, webinars like this and other local events. And also we hope to build a kind of information bank and have various different kind of social media channels where parents can access information about multilingualism and also identity. So if you are interested in becoming a member, there's a QR code there. You can scan that, fill in a quick form. It's free, and we'll send more information over on what we're doing. Mothers in Business is one of our partners on that, so they'll probably hopefully be doing some stuff together over the next year as well, just to make sure that we're reaching mothers in business groups as well. And if you are interested in finding out more about the work that we're doing with BElingual, we're actually having an information session on Monday. It's a half-an-hour session on what activities we have and what different kind of volunteering opportunities there are and ways to get involved to support your kids with their multilingual education and upbringing. And there we go. That is me done. This is my contact details. What I enjoy most about my job is being able to connect with families and kind of understanding their needs. And we really hope to develop BElingual in a way that responds to the needs of families. So I am only an email or a phone call away. So please do get in touch. I love to hear about people's experiences. So yeah, thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thanks everyone for watching. I'm gonna turn off the recording now. It was really lovely to have you.